Hi everyone. In a recent video I made, it was music theory question number 731. I got a few comments and I wanted to do a follow-up video just getting into more detail. I will leave a link to the original video in the description so you can check that out if you want. But just to recap real quick, the chord written here is an F sharp fully diminished 7 chord. And the notes, when you stack them into ascending thirds, you have an F sharp, A, C, and then E flat. Okay, and so then if you look at the intervals between the notes, we have minor thirds stacked on top of one another, and that's a diminished chord or diminished 7 chord, fully diminished 7. Okay, so a few people left some comments. It was Mike Geld 1280. He pointed out that there are actually 3 diminished chords superimposed on top of one another here, which is worth noting, right? So you've got F sharp AC, that's a diminished chord, A C E flat, another diminished chord, and then C E flat, and then F sharp or G flat, G flat, excuse me, that would be another diminished chord. So you've got 3 diminished triads on top of one another. Okay, and that's kind of cool. All right, so thank you for that, Mike. And then Kevin Johnson, 1677, he said, well, actually, yeah, this is a D sharp, fully diminished 7 chord. And yeah, inharmonically, you're right, Kevin. E flat can be D sharp, and then the F sharp is there, the A is there, and then the C, that's going to be the 7th of the chord. So you can respell this as a D sharp diminished 7 chord, okay? And that's something worth noting. With a fully diminished 7 chord, because you have stacked minor thirds, the chord is symmetrical, right? The intervals are symmetrical. You don't have any larger or smaller intervals. They're all stacked minor thirds. So what ends up happening, it's kind of cool. Any note of the chord can function as the root if you respell it, right? So in this case of an F sharp A C thing, F sharp can be the root, A could also be the root, and then we would have to respell the F sharp as a G flat. The C could be the root, and even the E flat can also be the root of the chord, okay? So that's how these chords work. Now, I do want to point out that when you start respelling things, okay, you have to understand that even though we've all been taught that, hey, inharmonically, F sharp and G flat are the same note, right? Because on the keyboard, yeah, absolutely, it's true. F sharp, G flat is the same note. C sharp, D flat, it is the same note. You got to know that historically, this wasn't always the case. And even for some, let's call them non-fixed pitch instruments, where you can actually make slight intonation adjustments as you play, like the violin, for instance, or any orchestral string instrument, you can actually adjust pitch a little bit. And for those players, for a lot of them, what they'll tell you is, hey, actually G flat and F sharp are not quite the same note. They're a little bit different. Now, I know that sounds kind of crazy and weird, but if you want to dig into this further, I think a really good book is a book called How Equal Temperament Ruined Harmony and Why You Should Care. It's kind of a cool title. It's by a guy named Ross Duffin, and it's not too long. It also doesn't get in to really heavy, like acoustic, mathematic, formulas and stuff like that. It's a pretty good book. So if this is something you're interested in, you want to check that out, I definitely would recommend that book. And yeah, when you're talking about spelling, you really want to pay attention to how the notes are spelled, okay? It is true that you can say, oh yeah, I can change the spelling from E flat to D sharp or, whatever. But there's a reason that the chord is written the way that it's written. I was recently working with a student, they're playing a Bach prelude on the keyboard, and you'll have to forgive me, I don't remember the catalog number, but the Bach, in a number of spots in the piece, he actually is writing the note E sharp, right? Which is weird. It's just enharmonically F, but he keeps writing E sharp. There's a reason Bach is writing E sharp. It's not just interchangeable with F, okay? Also, sometimes some people will comment, if I post a weird interval, like in a question where I say, hey, identify this interval, and it's like a diminished 6 or something like that, people will come into the comment section and they'll be like, well, it's just a perfect fifth. It's just a perfect fifth. It's 7 half steps. It's a perfect fifth. And yeah, enharmonically, you're right. It is a perfect fifth in terms of the sound, right? But actually the way it's spelled does matter. It makes a difference, okay? Because a composer, if they write a diminished 6, there's a reason that they do that, okay? And they're not just interchangeable, flip them back and forth, right? because some people will do that. They'll say, oh, this is a weird interval. It's diminished, you're writing a diminished sixth. That's weird. Just call it a perfect fifth. Well, you could go the other way with it, right? If every time you see a perfect fifth on the page and you just say, hey, that's a diminished sixth, that's a diminished sixth, that would be weird, right? Like it's inharmonically the same, but you can kind of call it whatever you want. So I just want to point that out. The spelling really does matter. It's not just like a pedantic, like I'm being, or me, or I don't know, somebody else is being, just really stubborn about it. Like there's a reason something's called, a perfect fifth versus a diminished sixth. There's a reason why this chord here, even though you can spell it different ways, you can label the chord as an A fully diminished 7 chord, or an E flat fully diminished 7 chord, or even you could label it a D sharp fully diminished 7 chord, like Kevin did, or you could label it a B sharp fully diminished 7 chord, right? Like C and B sharp are the same note. So you can get crazy with the spelling. And even just in this example alone, if you decide to just go hog wild with the spelling, there are actually 12 different ways to spell this chord. You could label this chord enharmonically 12 different ways. So yeah, it's maybe a good exercise to go through, but pay attention to the spelling. It really does matter. So that's it. Feel free to leave me a comment. I hope that stuff makes sense, and I hope I didn't rant too much. See you guys next time.